Hello and welcome to Art of Reading. This is my first video, so naturally I'm very excited about it. I'm planning to make a series of videos about the classics, the masterpieces of world literature. And I thought to myself, what better place to start than the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a literary work that is very close to my heart, and also maybe the oldest work of literature that has come down to us. It's very fascinating that despite this gap of many centuries that lies between us and the composition of this epic, this literary work speaks to us on such a profound level. In fact, it sounds so modern. The geographical setting in which the Epic of Gilgamesh was composed is roughly equivalent to modern-day Iraq. It's the area where scholars tend to call Mesopotamia, which means the land between the two rivers Tigris and Euphrates. Gilgamesh was most probably a historical figure who ruled in a city called Uruk, which was a part of this Mesopotamian region. He reigned in this city around 2800 years BCE, most probably. The version of the epic that we possess today was probably finalized in the second millennium BCE. The epic opens with a description of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is a very larger-than-life character. He's great in everything that you can imagine. He's in fact too great for his people. He is somehow wearing them out. He's also a tyrant, a very oppressive king. So the people complain to the gods to deliver them from the oppression of this king. So the gods create this noble savage called Enkidu. This noble savage is a match for Gilgamesh. He is just as powerful, just as strong. At first, Enkidu is totally in harmony with nature. He is unified somehow with the natural world. He's a primitive man. So he first has to be civilized before he can enter the city. He is sent a sacred prostitute, and he spends a week with this woman and becomes physically intimate with her. After this encounter, Enkidu becomes ready to enter civilized society. When he enters the city, he encounters Gilgamesh, and they have this wrestling match, which is very closely fought. But at the end, Gilgamesh has the upper hand. But after this battle, after this match, they become very intimate friends. And Gilgamesh's character is somehow reformed because it is the first time that he cares for someone else. You see, when we become friends with someone, we should put aside at least a certain part of our selfishness. We should renounce a part of our selfishness to maintain that friendship. So this is the first step of Gilgamesh's maturity. When they become friends, they decide to go on these heroic exploits. So a good deal of the epic is dedicated to the heroic adventures of these two friends. First, they go to the cedar forest and kill the guardian of the forest, Humbaba. When they return from this expedition, Gilgamesh and Enkidu look so glorious and so magnificent that the goddess Ishtar falls in love with Gilgamesh and proposes to him. But Gilgamesh rudely rejects Ishtar's offer of marriage, so you can imagine how enraged she is. She sends this bull of heaven down to earth, and this bull of heaven wreaks havoc everywhere. But Gilgamesh and Enkidu manage to subdue and kill the bull of heaven as well. Now at this point, the gods come to the conclusion that these two heroes have simply gone too far and that they have to be stopped. So they decide that one of them, Enkidu, has to die. So Enkidu falls ill, and after a few days he dies. This is a very poignant part of the epic because Gilgamesh, after his friend's death, becomes devastated. And the description of Gilgamesh's grief is so psychologically realistic. It's so poignant. And it's somehow a reminder for us that realism can't only be found in 19th century realistic novels. In fact, we can find psychological realism, existential realism in such ancient works of literature that have a mythological aura and a mythological atmosphere. Let me read you a part of this description when Gilgamesh is expressing his grief and sorrow over the death of his closest friend. The translation from which I'm reading is by Andrew George. This is Gilgamesh speaking. I shall weep for Enkidu, my friend. The axe at my side, in which my arm trusted. My festive garment, my girdle of delight, a wicked wind rose up and robbed me. O my friend, wild ass on the run, donkey of the uplands, panther of the wild. My friend Enkidu, wild ass on the run, donkey of the uplands, panther of the wild. These repetitions, by the way, are due to the oral nature of this poem, because of the fact that it has oral roots. Having joined forces, we climbed the mountains, seized and slew the bull of heaven, destroyed Humbaba, who dwelt in the forest of cedar. Now what is this sleep that has seized you? You've become unconscious, you do not hear me. But he lifted not his head, he felt his heart, but it beats no longer. He covered like a bride the face of his friend, like an eagle he circled around him. Like a lioness deprived of her cubs, he paced to and fro, this way and that. So Gilgamesh is devastated, and he is also very much conscious. He becomes very conscious of his own mortality. This is also, I think, very psychologically realistic, because up to this point, Gilgamesh was simply so great that he probably thought that he's somehow the exception and that he's not going to die. But the death of this beloved friend delivers the point to him that he is also going to die. So he's very much afraid of his own mortality as well. So from this point onward, the rest of the epic somehow has a more spiritual quality, because Gilgamesh goes on this spiritual quest to find the secret of immortal life. Specifically, to find this man called Uta-napishti, who has become immortal. On this journey, he meets many supernatural beings who advise him not to continue this quest. They tell him, your quest is futile, you are never going to find immortality, go and simply enjoy your life. There is one of these encounters that I would particularly like to focus on, and that's Gilgamesh's encounter with this tavern keeper, this keeper of an inn near the shore of the ocean of death. She is a minor goddess, she's called Shiduri. She says, if you and Enkidu were the ones who slew the guardian, destroyed Humbaba, who dwelt in the forest of cedar, killed the lions in the mountain passes, seized and slew the bull come down from heaven, why are your cheeks so hollow, your face so sunken, your mood so wretched, your visage so wasted? And then Gilgamesh responds thus. He says, my friend, a wild ass on the run, donkey of the uplands, panther of the wild, my friend Enkidu, whom I loved so dear, who with me went through every danger, the doom of mortals overtook him. 6 days I wept for him and 7 nights. I did not surrender his body for burial until a maggot dropped from his nostril. A very grisly image, by the way. Then I was afraid that I too would die. I grew fearful of death, and so wander the wild. What became of my friend was too much to bear. So on a far road I wander the wild. How can I keep silent? How can I stay quiet? My friend whom I loved has turned to clay. Shall I not be like him and also lie down, never to rise again through all eternity? But the advice that Shiduri gives him is very profound. Now, what I want to read you is taken from this rather older version of the epic, but it somehow summarizes the entire spirit and atmosphere of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the wisdom that lies at his heart. This is what Shiduri tells him. Please listen, it's so profound. O Gilgamesh, where are you wandering? The life that you seek, you never will find. When the gods created mankind, death they dispensed to mankind. Life they kept for themselves. But you, Gilgamesh, let your belly be full. Enjoy yourself always by day and by night. Make merry each day. Dance and play day and night. Let your clothes be clean. Let your head be washed. May you bathe in water. Gaze on the child who holds your hand. Let your wife enjoy your repeated embrace, for such is the destiny of mortal men. This is also very similar to what we see later on is in the wisdom literature of the ancient Near East. Most famously, perhaps, these wisdom books of the Bible, particularly the book of Ecclesiastes. But Gilgamesh, of course, is not satisfied with these pieces of advice, so he continues his quest, and finally he manages to reach the island in which Uta-napishti and his wife live. Uta-napishti, at this point, tells Gilgamesh that the immortality that the gods gave me and my wife was something that happened only once. It simply cannot happen again. And he tells Gilgamesh the account, the story of the flood, the deluge, which is very similar to the account of the deluge narrated in the first book of the Bible, Genesis. So from a comparative perspective, the Epic of Gilgamesh is also a very noteworthy book. I will probably make another video and talk about these similarities and differences. Uta-napishti basically tells Gilgamesh, this was something that happened only once. There is no secret. I cannot tell you anything. You simply cannot have eternal life. And the advice that he gives Gilgamesh is very much similar to the advice that I read you a minute ago. It's very similar to the one that Shiduri gives Gilgamesh. So Gilgamesh is understandably broken-hearted and disappointed, so he sets off to return to his hometown, to Uruk. But at the last moment, Uta-napishti's wife gives Gilgamesh this plant of eternal youth. It's a plant that will not give you immortality, but it will keep you young until your death. So Gilgamesh keeps this plant and he decides to take it to Uruk and plant it there so that other people will also be able to eat it and regain their vigor. Old people can regain their vigor. I think this is a very charming detail because here at this point we see that Gilgamesh is very far from the character that we encountered at the beginning of the epic. He is very much reformed. I mean, he really cares about other people, and that's very different from the character that we saw at the beginning. He was a very greedy and selfish king at the beginning of the epic, so he's a very reformed man toward the end of the epic. So he decides to take it back to Uruk, but on his return journey, when he stops somewhere to bathe in a pool, a snake comes and takes his plant away, steals this plant. And this is, from a mythological perspective, it is also an etiological myth. Etiological myths are myths that explain the origins of natural phenomena. So this part of the story explains why snakes shed their skins and apparently always remain young. So Gilgamesh returns to Uruk, and the ending of the epic is very pithy, very concise, but at the same time very moving and profound. He simply comes to the conclusion that he should be satisfied with what he has, with the achievements that he has had in his life. And he comes to the conclusion that the only kind of immortality that is available to human beings is that their names might be remembered after their deaths. So he looks at the walls of Uruk and he says to himself, this is what remains after me, and I have to remain satisfied with this. I mean, I'm just paraphrasing, of course, but this is basically what he means. What is so fascinating about this epic is that it explores the human condition. In contrast to many other works of ancient literature, its main goal is not to tell us the relationship between human beings and gods, or how we should serve the gods. The focus of the epic is on human beings. In fact, this scholar of ancient Mesopotamia called William Moran identifies this epic as an epic characterized by an insistence on human values and an acceptance of human limitations. So he calls this a document of ancient humanism. And I think it's a very good evaluation of this epic, because it is true that many of the characters, maybe even most of the characters, are divine, but those characters are really minor. The focus is on Gilgamesh and on Enkidu, and the trials and tribulations that they experience in their lives, the existential crises that they experience. So it is so humanistic. In fact, the gods are even described unfavorably on many occasions. When Enkidu falls ill, he does not resort to some deity, for instance. He doesn't pray to a god to deliver him. At the end of the epic, also, Gilgamesh comes to the conclusion that only human memory is the kind of immortality that one can have. So they all the time spurn the help of deities, the help of gods. It is so fascinating that the whole epic puts so much emphasis on the human condition, explores the human condition so profoundly. This epic is also noteworthy and extremely important because of the fact that many of the themes and motifs that will later on emerge in other works of literature of later periods can already be seen in this epic. So it's somehow a forerunner of many other great works of literature. So, for instance, the epic can be seen as a coming of age story, a story in which we read about the maturity of Gilgamesh. I mean, somehow maybe similar to the Bildungsroman, the type of novel that explores the development of a character from childhood through maturity, and usually has this moment of spiritual crisis. We also see, for instance, this journey to the underworld, the importance of dreams, for instance, and the idea that dreams contain omens and portents from a divine and a supernatural realm. All of these, which will emerge in later literature, can already be seen in this epic. And maybe even most importantly, we have one of the oldest accounts of the deluge, the flood myth, that later on emerges in the Bible and becomes very important. I'd strongly recommend that you read it. I think that this epic affirms the idea that there is some kind of a uniform human nature that does not change and has not changed from the earliest eras of the existence of human beings on Earth to the present, the 21st century. Because I think this is a work of literature that people can connect to and relate to, irrespective of the culture to which they belong. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe. I also very much like to know your opinions about the Epic of Gilgamesh, so don't forget to comment in the comment section below. See you in the next video.